data center developer loses it at a fiscal court in a letter, and then attempts an end around using this city of Burgin. This is all in Mercer County. Quite the happening when it comes to data centers. A lot of data center action going on here in Kentucky. We'll discuss also Fayette County Public Schools. Keeping a watch there on that superintendent story, because that is certainly turning into quite the garbage show. The superintendent has now, of course, I said it's going to lead to one heck of a legal fight, and it looks like it's going to do so. He has filed all kinds of different things, just throwing everything against the wall, seeing what sticks. So we will go through that as well. Also, if we have time, we'll discuss this Medicaid fraud case happening here in Kentucky. Federal charges filed, but there is some indications, of course, Bashir was somewhat aware of the concerns before all of that. So we'll be discussing all that and more today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. As I said before, make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. If you're watching on TV, on radio, or anywhere like that, you can head over to theandrewshow.com to see all the different places where you can listen to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Once again, that's theandrewshow.com. If you want to shoot an email over to the show, you can do that. info@theandrewshow.com. Once again, that's info@theandrewshow.com. Gotten a few story tips and things like that coming in from people being sent to that email. I want to make sure you guys have that. That is info@theandrewshow.com. But without further ado, let's dig down into it. So we have this data center going on in Mercer County. And it really caught my eye when I saw a letter from the developer, because the guy quite literally loses it in the letter, basically essentially threatening the county with a good time, threatening that he would go ahead and pull out and they would rue the day. Let's go through this letter here. So this is from a Brian Luftman, who's the founder and president of American Farm Investors. Few people pointed out, and they're very true. What an insidious name, American Farm Investors, when what they're doing is buying up land to try to get data centers going, especially right here in Kentucky. So American Farm Investors, he sent this letter over to the Mercer County Planning and Zoning. So the deal was they had went ahead and purchased some land, let's see, at 532 Bailey Pike, which is in the county. It is zoned for agricultural, okay? So off the bat, because we'll be discussing a few, because actually there's one data center that's been quote-unquote stopped or something that actually kind of sees some issues with obviously what the city did. That was in Lexington. And look, I know there's a different side of data centers that comes to it, where we're talking about the concern of stealing jobs with AI, obviously surveillance, those kinds of things. That's more anti-AI. And I think there's a completely different conversation we need to have on that. And I don't want to muddle up the real concerns that doesn't have to do with AI when it comes to data centers. Because what will happen all the time I see is that the people who are attempting to convince us to put data centers in places where they do not belong will sit there and say, look, you guys use AI all the time. You guys are using Facebook. You're using social media. Andrew, you use AI all the time, and yet here you are fighting against data centers. Let me be clear. First off, I do use AI mainly as an editor on posts. I will write out posts myself, and then I'll run it through an AI for spell and grammar check. That's why, quite frankly, some of the things I talk about, you can't ask AI to even write posts about in the first place. There's a lot of times too where I go through and I'll ask them to do fact checks, and they can't even fact check the data because it's not super easily publicly available. I have to upload my own documents and say, okay, now do a fact check. Is what I'm saying here accurate? And they'll say yes. So I do use AI as an editor personally, not as a content creator per se or a post creator, but more of an editor of the ideas that are coming out of my own mind. And I think, hey, look, that's a fine use of AI versus the old way I used to do it years ago, which was sending posts to a couple different people, asking them to spell check it for me. Anybody who texts with me will tell you I will write quick, I write fast, and with a lot of typos a lot of times. So it is helpful, of course, to have somebody there to help edit it. That's always on demand. But besides the point, so they'll try to confuse these issues. Oh, well, you use social media, you use AI, you use these things that use data centers. And so therefore, you should be for data centers in these locations, or you shouldn't be fighting against data centers in any kind of place. And I don't want to muddle the issues. I think they're two separate issues, and I think they actually have two different solutions to them when it comes to our concerns about the AI overlords, AI taking jobs, those things. And as such, I think that's more of a governmental policy discussion. That's more of a discussion about putting up those parameters. What does that look like? Good idea or bad idea? But you could be 100% for the AI revolution and still not want a data center where it doesn't belong. And so that, I think, is a huge point of discussion. And so when it comes to this property here in Mercer County, I know some of you are just so anti-AI and data centers at all. You're mad at me for saying that. But look, I'm just being honest where I stand at, is that I have concerns when it comes to AI taking jobs. I have concerns when it comes to AI surveillance. I have those concerns. I share them with you. There needs to be a much larger discussion, probably before we go forward with multi-billion-dollar AI data centers. I agree with you. But when it comes to whether it's a data center or whether this was the most benign technology in the world, but it was the same kind of concerns, a lot of water, a lot of power, a lot of noise, then I would still be concerned about the same things. And to be clear, too, as well, one of my big problems I have with AI right now personally is that it's clear a lot of people don't really want it. I think that's should be clear to you. It's clear to me. A lot of people really don't want these data centers in place. And so if there's ever an industry for the government to not hand out tax benefits, to not hand out incentives, to not try to get to come to a community, it would be data centers. But it's like our quote unquote leaders that we elect to represent us are so addicted to the idea of having to do whatever bidding corporations want them to do. They're so addicted to the idea of like, well, they gave us some campaign cash, so we got to do what they ask us to, that they will literally, this is something where you could literally take a position of, I'm not going to do anything. I'm not going to encourage them, but I'm not going to stop them. And you could kind of get away with that, I think, for a small degree, at least as a state legislator. I think as a local county judge, executive, and magistrate, you don't really have that option. Citizens are coming to people now asking them, hey, pass these ordinances, because they see what's happening in Burgin. But anyways, the point is, though, is my huge issue I have right now is I'm naturally against these multi-million-dollar tax incentives and cash giveaways and everything else in the first place. I think, we should all, if we're going to be subjected to a tax code, we should all be subjected to the same tax code. But if ever there was an industry not to do it for, this is the one. And yet they're still doing it. And that really annoys me, really upsets me. And it certainly creates a lot of frustration for me. But regardless, that doesn't change this Burgin letter. Sorry, I got off on a tangent. I want to talk about this Mercer County data center thing, post a little bit about it. I want to go through this letter here. But we are coming up on a break, of course. So we'll discuss that when we get back. Once again, if you're listening radio, TV, make sure you head over to theandrewshow.com, see all the places you can listen. Listening on the podcast version, listening on social media, please make sure you like, comment, share, subscribe. But we'll be back here in a few short minutes. Delicious. Oh, what's in here? Oh, well, what's in my tumbler here, the Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler, available for sale at brewed.store, is 1776, a brewed coffee, a Kentucky proud product that's roasted right here in Kentucky, of course. You can pick yourself up a bag at brewed.store. Free shipping on orders over $85. And they're sold in per pound, both ground, whole bean, and K-cups. If you like your little K-cup machines, we have that for you too. And the best part is per pound, it's cheaper than most of the boutique freedom-loving coffees out there. And this one's made right here in your own backyard. I know that's fantastic. So pick yourself up. We've got 1776, a French roasted dark blend which is historically funny because, of course, the French financed the revolution. And then also we have one of our other signature blends, Tyrant's Tears, a coffee that we meticulously harvest from famous tyrants like Andy Bashir, Pol Pot, and, of course, Mao. Additionally, we have other single origin coffees such as Cameroon Pea Berry, Kenya, Peru. Fantastic, fantastic blends. Go ahead and pick yourself up a bag today. Not only will you be supporting the show, but also you'll be putting in your mouth a delicious and tasty black nectar called coffee. So order yours today. Brewed.store. Once again, it's BREWED.store. Brewed.store. Free shipping. Orders over $85. Pick yourself up a bag and pick yourself up one of these spiffy tumblers. Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler today. Once again, that's brewed.store. And you're back on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So we are discussing this Mercer County data center. Caught my eye because of this letter here. I just happened to see it on social media. It was a fairly small post where I saw it at, and I just came across my feed and I read it and I said, oh my goodness, this is a guy crashing out for sure. So it's Brian Luftman. Apparently they've purchased a property in Mercer County with the idea they're going to sell it to a data center, develop a data center on it. But it wasn't zoned for that. It was zoned agricultural. And so he's trying to get this changed. And anybody who wants to sit there and say, and I mentioned before that there's actually a move Lexington make, I sort of kind of disagree with, but anybody who wants to make the argument that we should have data centers and we need to have them, well, already off the bat, you're losing me when you're saying, okay, they bought a property they knew wasn't zoned right for them to build on, and now are going out into the community trying to get it approved after they purchased the property. And I think that's part of my point here is you bought a property you knew wasn't zoned for what you're doing. And yet you're trying to change it anyways. And a few people would argue, well, Andrew, you're all about freedom and liberty and everything else. Wouldn't you be against zoning laws? And in general, I have a lot of issue with an overreach of zoning, an overreach of rules. Give you an example. If you live somewhere, especially out in the sticks, and you don't want to hook up to the grid, you want to run off solar and wind, and you want to collect rainwater and your own water and be completely off the grid with your property, that doesn't affect anybody around you. You can, because there's some communities that claim, well, that's falling into disrepair, everything else. Look, it doesn't affect anybody around you. If you're running off of electric power and rainwater and collected water, or collecting rainwater to help pay your water bill, or so you don't have to fully use it, that affects nobody else, right? I could understand maybe something if somehow, some way it's affecting somehow the property values, or people are like, I don't want to be near that. But I don't think nobody's like, oh, that house has solar panels, I don't want to live next to it. Nobody's like, oh, that house is collecting rainwater and I don't want to live next to it. Like, that's not a real thing. At least I don't think so. I've never heard that conversation. However, it's very real that people might say, look, I don't want to live with this monstrosity, huge thing in my backyard. I don't want to be concerned about not having water because they pull in so much water, or concerned about brownouts because of power concern. I mean, we've got areas of Kentucky right now. We've got an area of Kentucky, I believe it's, it's Casey County? I think it's Casey County. Somebody can correct me. That is under a drought advisory. They can't even wash their cars right now. We've got other parts of Kentucky that I've seen that are having brownouts and rolling blackouts because of power draw. They don't have enough power. So yeah, I would be concerned. Yes, if putting a data center on the same grid I'm on, I would be concerned about that. I would be. Which is why, once again, it would be really smart for the legislature to have passed the bill saying that any additional build out needed for electricity and improving the infrastructure in order to power up these data centers cannot fall to the citizens. It cannot be pushed onto the ratepayers. It has to be paid entirety by the power company, and the data center has to pay for it all. It cannot be passed on to the end user. You cannot cut off services to anybody you're currently servicing in order to provide power to the data center. Those kinds of rules in place would go a long way to alleviating some of that. But worried about water, worried about sound. And also, too, and this is something I'm personally concerned about, is this technology is leaps and bounds ahead. What happens when we get to servers that don't need this amount of space? What happens when we end up building these server farms in space? That's one of the options that people have talked about. I know Elon Musk has talked about it. I've seen some articles about technology saying, look, we won't need data centers because every single computer will become a server. And we'll be able to operate and basically act as a server for AI. I've seen those conversations taking place. So we've seen those things. We may not need these giant monstrosities, and you don't want that in your backyard. But most importantly, you bought a house out in the country. You bought an area that was zoned this way. You bought it with the expectation of this is what I was going to have. And then they're coming in and trying to rezone it. And so on the liberty and freedom side of things, I understand, look, if you're using your property for what you had originally purchased it for, what it's kind of meant to be, a residential property, and you want to do things, you want to put up a fence however you want, or that doesn't affect the neighbors. You want to live off, like I said, solar and water and rainwater and everything else. That doesn't affect other people. However, what does affect other people, as I said, too much power, too much water, brownouts, noise, those kinds of things. Polluting. I mean, it's like saying, look, Andrew, well, you're for liberty and freedom, so I should be able to make mustard gas factory. That's not a thing anymore, but let's pretend it is. I should be able to make mustard gas on my property right next to yours, and if mustard gas is coming over and floating over to your yard, well, that's not my it's my property. I should use it however I want to. No, you cannot affect others. And so if you purchase a property in an area that's agricultural and they're expecting to see farms in their backyards, that's why they purchased in that area the other residents, and now you're going to see this data center which affects property values around it go lower, but then property values elsewhere can skyrocket because you're buying land for so much. All this affects other people. And that's why they have zoning, to say, look, this is the residential area. They don't want to see this stuff. And so you want to say, well, I bought this property, zoned wrong, but I'm going to go here to Mercer County and I'm going to demand they rezone it, which is what Brian Luftman did. And he put this letter out there to Mercer County Planning and Zoning. He said, I will not attend the public meeting on Tuesday, April 28th. In my opinion, your ordinance draft is much too specific and restrictive for any data center to ever be developed within Mercer County. Also, considering that the ordinance draft designate a small 1.5 mile radius, which specifically disqualified our property at 532 Bailey Pike, I see no reason to attend another hostile meeting. Our potential developers canceled their flights and also decided not to attend. A world-class commercial developer and several international AI companies are very interested in developing in your county, but they will soon prioritizing other projects that have less tape. That sentence, when I read that, it read like a what is it? Like a scammer, like one of those Lebanese scammers, or not Lebanese, what do you call them? Somali scammers type people that are like, I'm a prince in Africa. You need to send me $5,000 immediately. Oh, well, if you're not, we are very respectable and a very respectful prince. And if you're not going to send us the $5,000, we will prioritize other places. If you're not going to do it, we will go elsewhere with our scam. Huh? How about that? That's what that reminded me of. Anyways, sadly, the elected officials of Mercer County will not have a chance to vote on such a development, which would bring massive tax revenue to the county. If this draft ordinance stays on track, the fiscal court will be forced to either adopt this restrictive ordinance and probably never get a data center, or B, deny passing the drafted ordinance and probably never get a data center. It's almost like they want to never get a data center. It's almost like the county's like against data centers going in agricultural land. Maybe you should take a hint. Go elsewhere. Shouldn't have bought a property that was zoned wrong in the first place. Also, it says, oh, we'll bring in a lot of tax revenue. And I get it. This has been the selling point by the elected officials. This is a selling point of the county fiscal people sometimes. This is a selling point for a lot of people. Heard Judge Executive of Oldham County making this point, saying, look at these tax revenues we'll bring in if we just let these data, look at the tax revenues, look at the tax revenues. And while granted, this is a letter to the government, so that would be of some interest to them maybe. To the general citizenry, we don't care. That's not a selling point to us. Andy Beshear said this. He said, this could double some school districts' budgets if you just let the data centers come in. And it's like, what are you guys not getting? We don't think the government can... Yes, giving the government more money has always solved our problems. What are you talking about? When has that ever been the case? When have you ever seen a government anywhere get more money and then do better? But anyways... provide better services. Like, when has that ever happened? The federal government's spending more money than it ever has before. Are we getting better services than we were in like the 70s and 60s? I would argue no. But anyways, if I were an elected official in Mercer County, I would not be pleased that planning and zoning presented only these two options. I hope that your commission and or Mercer County's fiscal county court swiftly realizes the adoption of this ordinance will simply create a worthless layer of regulation. Worthless layer of regulation. A worthless layer? You mean stopping you from building a data center in the county is worthless to you. It's actually the opposite of worthless. It's stopping you. I think calling it worthless would be a little extreme either way. But anyways, drafting an ordinance with which no developer can comply and then designating specific area as an industrial technology zone is actually quite amusing to me. That's how zoning works. We're saying, hey, if you want to build a data center, here's where you had to build it away from homes. You bought land in the bigger agricultural area and you're shocked they don't want it there. It's adopted as a draft. This ordinance would be a strong signal to all developers that Mercer County is inherently anti-development and impossible to deal with. If the goal of this ordinance was to block significant data center development in your county, you've taken a firm step in that direction. If I've misunderstood the ordinance, please feel free to reach out to me for more specific feedback. So it can't be worthless and then also effectively blocking you. It's obviously doing something worthwhile, clearly. But, so a crash out, right? And quite the direction to take. But Brian Luftman wasn't done. He's going to try an end around here, and they're going to try a new attempt. Rather than writing a letter like a pissed off lover, instead, they're going to go ahead and try to maybe draft in some people to help get this passed. We'll be discussing that when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Do you hear that? I do. It's Beshear crying. Why? Because you're listening to the Andrew Cooperrider Show. And I thought to myself, why should we let those tears go to waste? Like any good capitalist, I said, that is a resource that can be sold. So we capture those tears from Andy Beshear and other famous tyrants like Pol Pot, Mao, whoever else. And we collect them up and we put them into a delicious coffee called Tyrant's Tears, available at brood.store. Once again, that's brood.store. You can pick yourself up a spiffy Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler while you're at it and get yourself a nice bag. Free shipping on orders over $85. We have Tyrant's Tears in 1776, our signature blends. We also have flavored coffees such as Swiss chocolate and bourbon for those of you that want a little kick without the buzz from, alcohol. You'll get the buzz from the caffeine, though. Check out today. Brood.store. This is a Kentucky Proud product, roasted right in your own backyard. Brood.store. Support the show. It's cheaper per pound than most of those other boutique coffees. And it's available whole bean, ground, K-cups. However you make your coffee, we got you covered. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So discussing this Mercer County data center debacle, development issue going on here. Brian Luftman sends his little upset letter. Well, he's not done. So he's going to try a different way to be able to get his data center in place. And so what he goes ahead and does is he goes to, so the way this works is, so the county is planning and zoning, but the city of Burgin in Mercer County does not have planning and zoning. And so what Luftman tries to do is he tries to bypass the Mercer County planning and zoning by going to the Burgin city and asking them to annex on the property that he's purchased to the city. So then the county planning and zoning rules fall off. So it lets them skip that county process, which is now pretty much killed their attempt they started 6 months ago. And they're in a super big rush to do this because they have to cut a check to KU by August 1st to secure materials and power allocation for the data center they want to develop there. So otherwise they'll lose their spot in line and may not be able to get enough power for their data center from KU. And so they want a super fast annexation so they can get it done. And so they offer the city of Burgin $25,000 to cover costs to expedite everything and add on the property. Now, if the city of Burgin was just like, look, we're not even interested in this. We're not interested. They would have just said no, but that's not what they did. Instead, the city of Burgin went ahead and scheduled a special meeting to occur while the city attorney's out on vacation. So they contract with a different attorney to help them draft it together. And they're like, well, these people said they'd cover the cost of it. So city attorney's out. We have to rush this through. He's on vacation. They want us to rush this. So we're going to call this special meeting. And so they call this special meeting. And then an hour before the special meeting was set to happen in Burgin, they canceled the meeting due to legal issues. I believe there would have been an issue maybe with how it was called or open meeting rules or something like that, that would have violated the law as far as it goes. And so they will probably try again. This isn't necessarily dead, but what's interesting to me about this, and this sends me the clearest message, that the city of Burgin and the people there running that city need to remember who they're representing. Okay? Because they're not representing the people of their city when they do things like this. So if you go to the City of Burgin's Facebook page, all the other posts you can comment. However, they limited commenting and turned off commenting on the 2 posts dealing with the data center, and they weren't even clear that what they were doing was about the data center. They literally wanted to figure out a way around having to tell people about the data center. So all they did, so this was the first thing, right? So they made a post that said it was City of Burgin, a friendly little city. Agenda for special Burgin Council meeting 2022, Burgin Independent School, 6 p.m. Agenda. Request to write an ordinance for annexation request, property number, and put the parcel number. No comments allowed. So nobody could comment on there saying, hey, guys, this is about a data center. And they didn't come out and say this was about a data center. And then on the post where they canceled the meeting, they also disabled comments so nobody could say it's about a data center. So not only is Luftman trying to get around it, but it seems like the city of Burgin was trying to get around people throwing a fit over a data center. And not wanting, when you're disabling comments and not being forthright about what the meeting even has to really do with, that's you trying to get the citizens to be unaware that you're doing something that they maybe would take disagreement with. Now, Luftman, realizing his whole letter maybe was a dumb move, decides he's going to try to gin this up. Maybe he needs to connect with the community. And so he decides to try to start setting up meetings with influential people in the community. But who's helping him set that up? Well, according to the screenshots I'm getting of text messages, people working for the county and city governments are trying to set up the meeting. So not only do you have them trying to essentially, obviously, get around everything going on, they also decided to go ahead and try to get employees involved, which is fascinating. This year, according to Facebook post here, from Melinda Woodford for Burgin City Council. And starts sharing about people reaching out to him about the property and people texting and trying, and I believe city clerk is trying to set up the meetings. That's what I'm seeing, allegedly. So, that looks a little improper to me. Now, on the subject of data centers, so we talked about that, keeping our eyes on that. But hey, kick rocks elsewhere. Now, there is one thing where I have to say I do a little bit disagree here, and that's what Lexington did. So a company bought up the Lexmark campus in Lexington and wanted to build a data center there. That property is zoned right. It is a pretty sizable campus that's empty. There's not really any like real close residential stuff nearby. Like that is like if you're going to do it, that's where you should do it at, is a place like that. Now the city of Lexington's come in and put a moratorium on data centers to stop that happening. Now, what they should do is, if their concern is like, look, what are the concerns here? We got water, power, noise. That's the not in my backyardism going on, water, power, and noise. And then also to like setting up property values, farmland, etc. Right? That's all a part of it. Now, if you're going to put it somewhere, one, it's already zoned right in Lexington. It's not in anybody's backyard. That's already a sizable campus. So where your concerns really are just water and power and noise. Well, that's not a quiet part of town, obviously. It's an industrial area, obviously. Pass an ordinance saying, hey, look, you can only test the generators in the middle of the day on a weekday or something like that to deal with the noise. Pass an ordinance saying, or cutting a deal saying, look, for power concerns, if there's going to be rolling brownouts or blackouts, the data center gets the bottom of it. So basically saying, look, you're not going to cut off other people's power in order to keep this data center going if there's not enough power. That if somebody's going to lose power, it's going to be the data center loses power first. And then same thing with water. If we are running low on water, if we can't handle the amount of water they're using, they get cut off. That puts protections in place to protect the people in that the community at large. While at the same time, like I said, if you're going to build it, that's the place to build it. Now, some of you are like no data centers at all, and I'm highly, highly leaning in that direction, but also for probably the same reason you are, is that I'm really concerned before we march forward with these massive AI systems of getting government protections in place. Not only just to protect us on the data center side of things is the real world effects, like I've went through all the things that happen, but also the overreach, the government overreach, the surveillance, the IP, the whole list of issues that I think really need to be dealt with in a way to say job loss in a way that makes it to where people feel comfortable with it. If your citizens are saying, look, we don't feel comfortable with this, they don't feel comfortable. Now, some people try to write that off and say it's Chinese propaganda. I even got called a psyop. But these are real people's concerns. And if it's all propaganda and not true, then put some things in place to make people feel comfortable. If it's not true that these things won't happen, okay, well then pass a law saying it won't happen, to put those concerns to rest. But if you're not willing to do that, it makes us a little bit suspicious. Well, we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show, the Fayette County Public School Superintendent. That is turning into quite the S show. So we will be talking about that when we get back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Delicious. Oh, what's in here? Oh, well, what's in my tumbler here, the Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler, available for sale at brewed.store, is 1776, a brewed coffee, a Kentucky proud product that's roasted right here in Kentucky, of course. You can pick yourself up a bag at brewed.store. Free shipping on orders over $85. And they're sold in per pound, both ground, whole bean, and K-cups. If you like your little K-cup machines, we have that for you too. And the best part is per pound, it's cheaper. than most of the boutique freedom-loving coffees out there. And this one's made right here in your own backyard. I know that's fantastic. So pick yourself up. We've got 1776, a French roasted dark blend, which is historically funny because, of course, the French financed the revolution. And then also we have one of our other signature blends, Tyrant's Tears, a coffee that we meticulously harvest from famous tyrants like Andy Bashir, Pol Pot, and, of course, Mao. Additionally, we have other single origin coffees such as Cameroon Pea Berry, Kenya, Peru. Fantastic, fantastic blends. Go ahead and pick yourself up a bag today. Not only will you be supporting the show, but also you'll be putting in your mouth a delicious and tasty black nectar called coffee. So order yours today. Brewed.store. Once again, it's BREWED.store. Brewed.store. Free shipping. Orders over $85. Pick yourself up a bag and pick yourself up one of these spiffy tumblers. Andrew Cooperrider Show tumbler today. Once again, that's brewed.store. And you're back here on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. So, digging into it here, final segment. Fayette County Public Schools, Liggins, it's turning into quite the debacle. Those of you who have listened to the show for a while know we've covered this and all the issues going on there, and it's turning into quite a crud show, to say the least, and pretty ridiculous. And I think it's becoming pretty clear very early on as we're watching this play out that Liggins really has been the issue. You know, all the people that are like, this ain't Liggins' fault, he came into a bad situation, or it's the board, or it's the board's partially blamed because they're his boss. But anyways, it's this, or it's that, or it's entrenched staff. Liggins doing the best he can. It's quite clear this is Liggins' problem. So let's go through this here. So last episode where I talked about this, we went through his I'm quitting, but I'm not quitting. That led to him being essentially fired, put on administrative leave. And how we went through it. It clearly sounds like he was quitting. They were right to go ahead and try to move forward of getting rid of him. But this has resulted in Liggins filing some lawsuits. So first, before he filed these suits, let's rewind, because another thing came out here. Adrian Kamul, I believe, is like an administrator or something at Fayette County Public Schools, but also a state house rep. And let's pause there for a second. This is always kind of weird to me. So in a private company, to put it to you this way, to be a state house rep, okay, you pretty much 3 to 4 days a week during the work week have to be off January through like March, April, depending on the year. So for 3-4 months out of the year, you have to be off like 3 days a week almost. There's like 2 weeks in there where you're not, and a week here, a week there, but whatever. It's at least 3 days a week. And then further out, you have 2 or 3 days a month that you can't work either. And schools already, in case you didn't know this, have a few months off a year that aren't in that range that I gave where you'd mainly be gone. So I don't understand, and there's a few of these that happen. I couldn't imagine a private employer that, you're doing like an office job that they rely on you. I mean, you're an administrator. Imagine being an administrator of a private company and saying, a quarter of the year, I'm going to be gone 60, 70% of the time. And them still keeping you. But clearly, the schools are doing this because, to them, it's these public school employees. You'll find a fair amount of public school employees that are also state house reps, state senators. Because to them, it's worthwhile. It's good for them to have somebody in the legislature that's also working. It's like their own lobbyist. And so they'll do things that no private company would ever do, of allowing a person to hold a position while still working basically this whole other almost full-time job. Missing way more work than you normally would allow if at a private company. Because It means that they might be able to actually, they get something. She's still working for them. That's what it is. Adrienne Camille, still working for Fayette County Public Schools, even when she's a legislator, because she's advocating on their behalf. But anyways, so she was saying, I guess, online some things about Liggins being bad at being a superintendent. And allegedly, he's caught on camera sliding a note under a door. Now, he claims that those are he gave out notes of encouragement, but Camille says she got a note slid under her door, which was a printout of an email saying from this law firm saying she could be sued for what she's been saying for defamation. Well, she contacts the law firm, and the law firm says, that's not us. We've never had this conversation. And so what's alleged here is that Liggins slid a printout of an email under the door of a state house rep that also happens to be an admin at Fayette County Public Schools that says that she keeps being mean to Liggins. She could be sued for defamation, according to this law firm. And now the law firm's saying, we never wrote that. We have no idea what you're talking about. That's fake. So anyway, so you have that story going on, putting that to the side. But Liggins comes in and he says, I'm going to name names. I'm going to lose my stuff. You remove me improperly. You're to reinstate me as superintendent right now. I'm to be reinstated as superintendent. Which, why would you want your job back at this point? Like, do you really think you could move forward? Does any of us think you could move forward after all this? I don't think so. Do you? It's such a weird thing. Like, oh, we fired you. It's getting really ugly. You've also now been accused of sliding notes under doors. And you're like, nah, I want my job back. What are you talking about? Anyways, I guess his claim is trying to claim he didn't actually quit. So he at least could get some separation and some of that sweet, sweet cash. So he says, reinstate me or else. I'm going to name names. Well, they didn't reinstate him. He put this deadline on him. They didn't follow it. He didn't name any names. But then he filed he's now claiming whistleblower status and claim he's being attacked. He's being singled out, or they're firing him because he blew the whistle on things that they were doing, and that he's being scapegoated for financial issues and so on and so forth. First off, buddy, you're in charge of the school district. If the school district's having financial issues, unless they're stemming from a vote from the school board, and that's not what's going on here. What's going on here is the records have been improperly kept. So the school boards have been lied to over. The CFO has said, you have not been getting good information to the school boards. So it has nothing to do with how the school boards have voted, had to do with incompetency within the leadership of Fayette County Public Schools, of which he's the head of. So you can't say you're being scapegoated. The buck stops with you. You're the head of it. Sure, you may have been relying on somebody else to do the job, but it's your job to make sure those under you who have been hired to do the job are doing the job. Also, how can you be a whistleblower when you're the one in charge? It's like the president being like, there's this policy going on in the federal government. I'm blowing the whistle on it. And it's like, stop the policy then. You're the guy. You're the one who can stop it. What are you talking about? It's like saying I'm blowing the whistle on my own team cheating when you're the coach. Stop the cheating. You're not a whistleblower. If it's been going on and you haven't stopped it, you're not a whistleblower. You're complicit because you're the one who could stop it the entire time. You don't get to whistleblow about problems that you have dominion over. But yet he's trying to do that. And this is clear. This is going to be very expensive. And you know, I think he's going to end up getting a payout. I know everybody's talking about he's not going to get a payout. I think he's going to end up getting a payout. And I think it's because, quite frankly, it's just going to be too expensive. It's just going to get too expensive. It'd be cheaper for Fayette County Public Schools to give him $500,000 and ask him to leave than it would be to pay out all these lawyer fees. And that's what he's hoping for. So we'll see what they end up doing, but we'll see. Also, real quick, we have this. You know that federal indictment of those Medicaid fraud? Yeah, just so you know, the auditor of Kentucky has been calling out Beshear's systems and processes for failing to stop against fraud now for like years, and Beshear hasn't done anything about it. And I just feel like it's really important everybody be aware of that. Because people try to say, look, it's on the Republican legislature. They have power here too. It's literally, he's not following the policies. The laws and rules already exist. Don't pay out fraudulent claims. Those already exist. Just if you don't have improper checks in place, then it will continue to happen. So you can't blame it's literally Beshear's fault. But regardless, put that to the side. Well, you guys, that's what we have time for today on the Andrew Cooperrider Show. I thank you all so much for joining me. We'll be back here next week. I hope you have a great rest of your day.